Hey my dear listener, before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment down where are you from and what's your time right now. Let's jump into the video. Now let's begin. Story 1. The Turnip Farmer of East Anglia, Life on the Edge of the Manor. The first light of dawn comes not with drama, but with a slow gray lifting of the horizon. There's no rooster call, no clanging bell, just the wet creak of a wooden shutter opening and the scent of morning mud heavier now after last night's rain. You wake up on a straw-stuffed mattress in a single-room cottage, under a woolen blanket that hasn't seen proper soap in seasons. The air smells of damp smoke and sheep. You are Edric, a villein, a type of unfree peasant in the year 1294, in a village tucked into the low, flat lands of East Anglia. Your family has farmed the same strips of land for generations, though none of you have ever held legal title. You belong to the land more than the land belongs to you. The manorial system dominates your life. While you are not a slave, you are not free either. The lord of the manor, whose hall you've only glimpsed from a distance, owns the soil. You must farm his domain land several days a week without pay, in addition to tending your own narrow plot. Your rights are detailed in memory, not paper, passed down by word and obligation, and your duties are enforced more by the rhythms of custom than any guard's sword. This morning, your task is turnips. They are the dependable crop of the poor, hardy, frost-resistant, and tolerant of East Anglia's clay soils. They are planted thickly in fallow plots and fed to both humans and animals alike. This year, the harvest is late, and the roots are stubborn in the earth. Your hands are cracked and blistered from yesterday's digging, and you can already feel the damp through your rough-spun woolen tunic. Breakfast is thin ale and rye bread. The bread is dense, unevenly baked in a communal oven you share with 10 other families. If it's too hard, you soak it in the ale. Cheese, if you're lucky, is rare this time of year. The cow is drying up. She needs more feed than you can spare. By the time you reach your strip of land in the open field, the ground is quiet. The fog still clings low to the furrows. Your family strips are scattered, no tidy fence or enclosed boundary here. You have 4 strips, each about the width of a cart and the length of a long walk. The arrangement is inefficient by modern standards, but it allows the lord to control crop rotation and keep peasants interdependent. You dig with a long-handled tool called a spade, not quite a shovel and not quite a hoe. The soil sucks at your boots. Each turnip comes up with a dull pop, clods of earth clinging to its swollen belly. The rhythm is meditative, and soon, time slips away. You do not measure hours by the sun's height or any ticking device. You measure it by the ache in your back, the hunger in your stomach, and the position of the shadows on the neighboring hedgerows. Children wander past, chasing a stray chicken. One pauses to ask your name not out of curiosity, but as a test for a village rhyme. You answer and they run off laughing, leaving only muddy footprints. They too have chores, but children's labor is folded into play. They scavenge for firewood, watch younger siblings, and shoo birds from the fields, all under the guise of mischief. Midday brings little relief. A break is permitted, though brief. You eat dried peas mashed with oats into a sort of paste, wrapped in a cloth. It's cold and sticky but filling. There is no conversation here. Talking means stopping, and stopping means falling behind. The manor reeve, a peasant appointed to enforce the lord's rules, keeps a silent watch. He isn't cruel, but he is strict. He reports to the bailiff, who answers to the steward, who answers to the lord. And even though you may rarely see these figures, their influence is constant like weather. Back at home, your wife tends the hearth. She maintains the thatch roof, cares for the cow, weaves wool, and watches the children. Her day is no lighter than yours, though she rarely leaves the bounds of the village. Women manage the domestic economy, fermenting ale, tending herbs, nursing the sick. Marriage is not romantic, but practical. A household is a unit of survival, not a union of dreams. The village itself is small, perhaps 200 souls. It has no walls, but a common boundary defined by forest on one side and bog on the other. There is a church, of course, run by a priest who reads Latin none of you understand. His sermons are brief and his tithes are not. You owe the church 1/10 of your produce, even if blight or flood has ruined your crop. As the sun begins to dip behind the low hills, you stack the turnips into a roughly woven basket. The wind is rising, and with it, the smell of peat smoke from every chimney. You return to your cottage slowly, passing other workers who nod in silence. Conversation is rare. There is too much work and too little energy. At home, the hearth glows faintly. Dinner is the same as lunch, only warmer. You eat slowly, letting the heat fill your belly. Your eldest son asks when he can help with plowing. He's barely 10, but you nod. He'll learn soon enough. There is no candlelight, no evening stroll. Only darkness broken by firelight and breath. You mend a torn strap on your boot with a bone needle, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. Sleep comes early and heavily. Yet as your eyes close, you wonder something simple, something ancient. Will the turnip yield be enough to trade for salt next week? The sun rises a little later in the autumn, and today it does not pierce the thick gray clouds overhead. The air smells faintly of frost, though it hasn't bitten yet. Your joints ache a little more than usual. The soil is damp, the firewood is low, and the week ahead brings both your own field work and obligation to the Lord's domain. That's the deal. A villain's land is his to farm so long as he serves. Today is a week-work day, a form of compulsory labor owed to the Lord of the manor. On these days, you do not farm your own land. Instead, you work on the larger central landholding that surrounds the manor house. It's a patchwork of fields like yours, only organized under tighter control. The reeve and bailiff monitor every task. These obligations aren't occasional. They're regular, perhaps 2 or 3 days a week during less busy seasons, increasing to 5 or 6 during harvest or plowing. You walk to the domain with a dozen others. There's no fanfare, no guards, no greeting from the Lord, who likely hasn't left the hall in days. The manor house is just visible through a copse of trees, a timber-framed building surrounded by a small fence, smoke drifting from its stone chimney. It is not a castle, no moat, no battlements. The manor is administrative, not military. Castles are for kings and warlords. This is for grain. Today's task is carting manure, the most necessary and least glorified job of the agricultural calendar. Dung is collected from livestock and spread in great steaming piles across fallow fields. It is turned into the soil with heavy wooden plows and left to rest through winter. Without this natural fertilizer, the land would yield nothing by spring. The smell is worse than usual. Rain has turned the paths to muck and the manure piles into slurry. You use a wooden pitchfork to shovel the mess onto a flat cart pulled by 2 oxen. It is slow work, your boots squelching ankle deep. You are covered in filth by midday. No one speaks. No one jokes. This is the job. It doesn't get easier. It only becomes more familiar. After hours of labor, you and the other peasants stop for a midday meal again, bread and ale, though today the reeve has allowed a fire to be lit for warming soup. Someone has brought onions, someone else beans. The stew is simple but hot, and you eat in relative silence, seated on overturned baskets and logs. A boy with an injured leg asks if he can carry messages instead of shoveling. The reeve considers. Maybe. In the background, you hear the clatter of hooves. A messenger on horseback rides past, likely from a neighboring manor or even the 100 Court. No one waves. You're not the sort they speak to. The domain work finishes with the afternoon sun sinking low. You return to your cottage sore, covered in filth, but satisfied. The more you work now, the better you're standing with the manor reeve. That can mean smaller obligations later, perhaps a favor, or leniency when your pig wanders too close to the Lord's garden. Inside your cottage, the hearth is lit, and your youngest daughter is picking lice from her hair. Your wife has been spinning wool, though she complains the flax harvest was poor this year. You may have to buy thread, and that means trading eggs or cheese you don't yet have. You wash with cold water, wiping your arms and face with a damp cloth. Soap is a luxury, made from rendered fat and ashes, precious and only used sparingly. Clean doesn't mean spotless. It means tolerable. The evening is short. With daylight fading, the family gathers around the hearth. Your son carves a wooden spoon with a small knife. You mend a broken thatch bundle from the roof. Water has been leaking near the wall, and you'll need to climb up soon to fix it. That requires borrowing a ladder, and that means owing another favor. In the dim flicker of firelight, your wife mentions that the tithe collector came earlier. The church wants dried peas, and perhaps a coin if you can spare it. You sigh. The priest's demands are spiritual and material. He prays for your soul and then charges you for the service. Religion is not distant in your life. It is ever present. The calendar you live by is not marked in months but in feast days. You may not know the king's birthday, but you know when to fast for St. Andrew, when to rest on Michaelmas, and when to slaughter pigs before All Hallows. The rhythm of your life is built not just around the land, but around the liturgy. There are no books in your home, no writing tools, but there is knowledge passed down. You know when to sow barley. You can read the sky for rain. You know how deep to dig to avoid root rot and which herbs help a cow in labor. Your father taught you these things, and you will teach your son. Later, a neighbor knocks. He's brought word that the manor's boonwork is scheduled for next week. That's extra labor demanded during harvest without compensation. A gift to the Lord, or so it is called. Failure to appear brings fines or worse, loss of land access. You nod and accept it, though inside you grit your teeth. There is no point in resisting. The community depends on order, even if that order feels one-sided. Before bed, you say a short prayer, not because you're devout necessarily, but because you fear what might happen if you don't. The saints are part of your world, as are spirits, devils, and fate. Protection is scarce. You cannot read Latin, but you believe the words mean something. Tonight the fire is low and the roof still leaks. You pull your blanket close, wrapping it around your shoulders. Your wife sleeps near the children, sharing body heat. The house groans in the wind. And as sleep overtakes you, one final thought lingers. If the reeve is replaced next year, will the new one honor your father's old arrangements, or will everything have to be negotiated again? The first frost arrives overnight. You wake to silence, no dripping thatch, no creaking shutters in the breeze. Instead, everything is still. You step outside and your breath hangs visibly in the dawn air. The ground is white with a thin sheen of frost, each blade of grass stiff and glittering. The turnips you harvested last week are now stored in a pit covered with straw, safe from the freeze for now. Frost is beautiful, yes, but it is also warning. Winter is not coming, it's here. The agricultural year for a peasant like you is less a cycle than a long, slow funnel. Everything narrows toward winter. Resources dwindle, choices vanish. You do not grow in winter, you survive it. Your tasks shift. No longer are you in the fields daily. Instead, you prepare. You slaughter a pig if you have one, salt the meat, and hang it to dry. You cut firewood, though technically it's illegal to take from the Lord's forest without permission. Most of your kind scavenge wind-fallen branches or pull peat from the bog, accepting the back-breaking labor over the threat of fine or imprisonment. You repair what can be repaired. Clothes are patched. Thatched roofs are rebundled. Wooden tools are resharpened or replaced with makeshift handles. There's no blacksmith nearby, just a traveling one who visits after the snows melt. Food must stretch. You begin to ration. Lentils and peas become soup. Bread grows coarser as your flour supply ages. Moldy portions are cut away. A spoiled turnip may still be cooked if it's boiled long enough. Your cow's milk has slowed and you've already dried the last of the summer cheese. Chickens lay fewer eggs in the cold. Illness follows the frost. Your neighbor's youngest daughter has a cough that rattles like loose stones. The herbalist offers mullein and thyme, but no one knows if it helps. She says the cold air is evil. The priest says it is God's trial. You say little. The girl's cough grows worse. Despite the hardship, the village does not collapse. It bends. Communal survival is its own system. Food is shared quietly without ceremony. A family who butchered a pig shares its offal with neighbors. Another household lends a spindle when yours breaks. It's not generosity, it's mutual insurance. One day your roof will fail in a storm and you'll need help rebuilding. One day your wife may need a midwife. One day you will be too old to plant your own barley. You remember your father, stooped and gray, still pulling weeds at 60, hands as cracked as bark. When he died, he left no inheritance but his name and your obligation to the land. Still, he was respected, even by the reeve. He remembered a famine in his youth, the Great Famine, some call it now. Grain rotted in the fields. People boiled nettles for dinner. Some ate moss. He said hunger changes how you pray. The manor itself remains aloof. The Lord does not visit. His steward enforces the rules, collects the grain, records the tallies on a wooden board marked with notches. He rides in on a thick horse and leaves with the goods. You rarely speak to him. What changes, though, are the rumors. They come like whispers on the wind. A rebellion in the south, a tax protest in the west, a distant peasant accused of poaching was hung. Some say a bishop was caught selling indulgences to children. Others say the French are planning another invasion. None of this affects your turnips. Still, you listen, because even in this tightly bound life measured by seasons, taxes, and tithes, the world still moves. Kings change, storms rise, plague travels. You've heard of the cities, Norwich, for instance. A world of noise and market stalls and paved streets, though some say the mud there stinks worse than any village. But what draws your curiosity most is the idea of people choosing to leave the land, to walk away from obligation, to become freemen. You don't say this aloud. To speak such things is dangerous. A villain cannot just leave without permission. It's theft of labor, a breach of contract, though unwritten. It is enforced by custom and by the reeve. Still, the thought lingers. You know a boy who disappeared one night and was never seen again. Maybe he died in the woods. Maybe he became a tanner's apprentice in some distant shire. You don't know. The church, the manor, the village, they all assume permanence. But you've seen otherwise. You've seen fields drowned in sudden floods, barns collapse under snowfall, and strong men break from illness in days. One day, too, your son may question the village order. But tonight you sit by the hearth. The fire burns low. Your daughter stirs a pot of turnip and barley soup, and your wife braids her hair by candlelight. The children are tired and the animals quiet. There's peace here, however fragile. You speak softly, telling your son about planting lines straight and evenly spaced. He asks why. Because if the lines are straight, the plow runs clean. If the plow runs clean, the roots grow well. If the roots grow well, the harvest holds. And if the harvest holds, you live. That's the point of it all. Not glory, not power, just the steady, silent act of continuing. You look at your hand, scarred, calloused, steady, and you wonder, in 1,000 years, will anyone remember how much history was built with hands like these? Story 2. Wool and Weather, a weaver's winter in 13th century Flanders. You live in the heart of Flanders, in the town of Ypres, sometime in the winter of 1287. The wind from the North Sea bites cold through the narrow, cobbled alleys, curling under doors and rattling shutters in a rhythm as steady as the clacking looms inside nearly every home. This is not a quiet farming village, but a town, bustling in its own way, even in the dead of winter. Your name is Johann, a master weaver, or at least one respected enough to be paid in coin rather than goods. You are neither rich nor poor, but something in between, caught in the slow tide of change that is reshaping this part of Europe. Flanders is rising. Cloth is the reason. The wool trade has turned this damp, marshy region into an economic hub, not glamorous, not noble, but vital. English sheep provide the raw material. Flemish hands provide the skill. Your hands. Your day begins before light. A tallow candle flickers as you rise from your straw mattress layered with a heavy wool blanket, your own handiwork, naturally. The room is cold and stone-floored, the kind of cold that lingers in your bones and makes every joint whisper complaint. Breakfast is simple: brown bread, a wedge of sharp cheese, and ale so weak it's more cereal than drink. You eat while checking the warp you set up the night before, brushing away lint and dust. No wasted movement. Time is wool and wool is coin. Your loom is a horizontal treadle loom, newer than the upright type common in smaller villages. It lets you work faster with more control. The setup is not easy. It takes hours to warp the threads to balance the tension. But once you begin weaving, the rhythm carries you. Foot press, shuttle throw, beat, repeat. Clack thump whir. Your neighbors are weavers too. The walls of this alley hum with the same sounds, more musical than any church bell to your ears. Flanders is dense with cloth workers, carders, fullers, dyers, shearers, and finishers. No one makes cloth alone. It is a communal industry, even if each task is performed in isolation. You work mostly with undyed wool this time of year. The dyes freeze if the weather turns, and besides, the guild prefers dyed cloth to be prepared in larger batches under supervision. Your cloth is coarse, but tightly woven. It will be sold for utilitarian purposes: blankets, cloaks, maybe sails if you're lucky. By midday, you pause to stretch your back. A knock at your door reveals a fuller's apprentice collecting completed fabric. Fullers clean and thicken woolen cloth by pounding it in vats of water and urine, a profession less glamorous than yours, though no less essential. You hand off a folded length of cloth and record the transaction with a charcoal mark on your wall ledger. No parchment or ink here, just tally lines, scratched over layers of plaster. In the square, the cloth hall looms, a sign of civic pride. Guilds meet there, laws are set, disputes judged. You're a member of the local Weavers Guild, not powerful but protected. Guilds offer stability, set prices, regulated quality, and protection from outside merchants who might undercut wages, but they also mean rules. Women can work but rarely hold guild offices. You, as a man of middling rank, have some say in the workshop's decisions, though you've never dared speak against the elder masters. Those who do often find their looms mysteriously broken, their apprentices lured away, or their supply of wool delayed by days without explanation. You once had an apprentice. His name was Lode, a sharp boy, too sharp for your liking. He left last year to work in Bruges. You haven't heard from him since. The streets outside your door are coated in filth and straw. Human waste mingles with dye runoff and cooking refuse. You don't notice it anymore. Even the reek of woad, the dye plant used to create blue hues, barely registers. The town smells like work. A bell tolls in the distance. Not the church bell, this one is heavier, more deliberate. The city watch patrolling for curfew. Night falls early in winter and the streets are not safe after dark. Too many workers, too few coins. Desperation breeds opportunists. You shutter your window, light another tallow candle, and return to your loom. Clack thump whir. The repetition becomes meditation. The beat of the loom is predictable, unlike the world outside. You think of England's sheep, grazing unknowingly to feed this city's hunger. You think of the merchants who will haggle over your cloth, mark it up, sell it again and again until it becomes unrecognizable. You wonder if the hands who wear your cloth will ever know who wove it. Probably not. But there's power in knowing your role. The cathedral may belong to the bishop, the market stalls to the guild elders, but the loom, that is yours. Your fingers move by instinct now, eyes half closed, mind drifting somewhere between the weft and the warp. You remember your father weaving by candlelight, the same sound filling the room, the same frost on the window pane. Your son is still too young to reach the petals, but soon, perhaps. You pause to blow out the candle and crawl back under the woolen blanket. In the dark, you can still hear looms echoing faintly from nearby houses, like crickets in a summer field. And as you drift off to sleep, a question clings to the edge of your mind. What happens to a town when the thread that binds its people, trade, craft, and cloth begins to fray? The frost deepens as the days crawl forward. Flanders in December does not roar. It seeps slow, damp, and bone-deep. In the mornings, your breath still hangs in the air above your breakfast, even indoors. The hearth burns low. Firewood is precious, and the dyers have taken most of the town's clean fuel for boiling vats. Still, you rise. You always rise. Your loom creaks with the cold, the threads slightly stiff in the winter air. Before you begin your weaving, you warm your fingers by holding them over the candle's meager flame. Burned fingers weave poorly. The Weavers' Guild is meeting today, which means a trip to the Lakenhall or Cloth Hall. It dominates the town's square stone-arched, with a bell tower visible for miles. Once, the market had been open-air, chaotic and crude. But now, Flanders' wealth, if not yours, has brought order. And stone. You're not an elder. You don't speak, not really. You listen, standing near the edge of the hall with a dozen others craftsmen like you, too experienced to be dismissed, too poor to be heard. At the center of the room, the guild masters debate. They're not just talking about wool prices. They're talking about England. There is a tension in the trade, and you feel it as surely as you feel a loose thread under your shuttle. England exports the raw wool that feeds this city. And lately, their own burghers traders from London, York, and beyond have grown hungry for profit. They are sending more wool to Italy now, to the cities of the south, bypassing the old routes through Calais and Bruges. That means less wool for you. It's not just economic, it's political. England's king, Edward I, is testing alliances. Flanders is caught between powers, England, France, the Holy Roman Empire. And here, in the drafty warmth of the Cloth Hall, that grand political game becomes something more urgent. Fewer sacks of wool mean fewer hands at work. Guild quotas will change, prices will rise, wages will fall. The elders argue over whether to hoard the existing stock or petition the Count of Flanders to negotiate directly. You know what they'll decide? Nothing. Not yet. They never act until the problem breaks through their stained glass windows. When you return home, your wife greets you with a strained smile. The dye merchant, she says, has increased prices for madder root, the source of deep red. You won't be buying any this month. Your savings, kept hidden in a clay pot beneath the loom, might last another few weeks, but only if you sell 2 more bolts of cloth. That evening, a neighbor visits Jarrett, a fuller with whom you trade cloth. His hands are raw, almost white from the lye he works with. He speaks softly, watching the door as he does. There's talk, he says, that the Count of Flanders will impose a new levy on the guilds. More coin, he says, to secure trade routes. More protection, more tolls. You nod. It was always coming. You remember your father grumbling about taxes, about bribes to officials, about dishonest reeves. But you had hoped this century might be different. With trade expanding, with Ypres and Ghent growing in wealth and size, you had thought just for a while that things might turn in the weaver's favor. Instead, you are now taxed by lords who do not weave, ruled by guild elders who do not dye, and threatened by kings you will never meet. Still, the loom must run. You light your candle and sit back at your post. Your fingers fall into rhythm. Foot treadle, shuttle, beat. The cloth must be ready by next week for inspection. Any irregularity and uneven thread, a weak selvage, and you'll be docked half your pay. Later that week, the weather worsens. Snow now, not just frost. Your breath fogs inside your own home. The wool is harder to work. It picks up moisture from the air. Threads snap. You retie them by lamplight. The days pass. The loom sings on. Then suddenly a new kind of sound. Drums. You step outside. Others do the same. A group of town watchmen are marching past, their boots loud in the snow-muffled street. Behind them rides a mounted herald in the Count's colors. He reads aloud from a scroll, his voice rough and monotone. All burghers of Ypres are hereby ordered to present guild rolls for taxation. Failure to comply will result in forfeiture of privileges. You hear muttering from the crowd. Someone spits. Someone else quietly says, "Another levy. For what? To line the Count's hall with tapestry while we patch our roofs with rags." The guilds have power, but it is not sovereign. The count holds ultimate authority, backed by knights and gold. But the towns have grown bold. And now, you sense a tension rising not unlike a loom's thread pulled too tight. That night you hear whispers of protest. Not open rebellion, just refusals. Some fullers will not pay. A group of weavers plans to leave for Leuven, where taxes are rumored to be lighter. But leaving a city is not easy. Citizenship, rights, guild standing, these things don't travel with you. Still, it makes you wonder. Is loyalty to a town, a guild, or a trade worth enduring the squeeze of power you cannot touch? Winter tightens its grip. The streets of Ypres are buried under gray snow, turned black by the daily grind of carts and boots. Icicles form on the edges of the cloth hall. The once musical hum of looms has gone quieter. Fewer workshops run at full pace now. Some households have sold their wool back to the merchants at a loss, unable to keep up with the rising costs of dye, grain, and taxes. You have not yet done so, but the pile of wool by your bench is thinning. You burn peat when you can find it, wood when you cannot. The peat smoke fills the house with a bitter smell, but the heat it offers is worth the cough. Your fingers crack at the tips. You wrap them in linen at night, not for comfort but preservation. A weaver without hands is no weaver at all. More troubling than the weather is the silence from the guild elders. They haven't addressed the new levy publicly. Rumors abound they're negotiating, they're preparing a list of who should pay more, they've made a deal behind closed doors. None of it reaches you, the ordinary weaver. Your cloth still must be made. Your taxes still must be paid. Then one evening, something changes. It starts not with swords or shouts, but with a knock. At your door, two men you recognize from the spinning quarter arrive, wrapped in wool cloaks dusted with snow. They speak low, glancing behind them often. "There's to be a petition, a formal one," says the shorter man. "To the guild elders. Weavers, fullers, dyers sign it and we'll present it together." "And if they ignore it," you ask. "Then we appeal to the count, or to the king, or we stop the looms." A strike. The word isn't used, not openly, but the intent is clear. You stare at the fire thinking. There has never been a full stoppage in your quarter, not in your lifetime. Work is survival, protest is risk. Yet lately, work no longer ensures survival, and protest is beginning to seem like the only path left. The next day, you visit the draper's lane where the petition is being kept, a parchment thick and coarse. Not many names yet. Some hesitate. Some scrawl false names out of fear. You write your own clearly. If this is a risk, so be it. You would rather be remembered as a weaver who resisted than one who quietly starved. Still, the guild's reaction is swift. That evening, a notice is nailed to the church door. Let all members of the Guild of Weavers remember their oaths. To disrupt the work of Ypres is to disrupt the peace of Flanders itself. Those who interfere with the guild's duties shall be denied work and marked. The next morning, you find a symbol scratched into the side of your doorway. A circle with a line through it, nothing official but known, marked, watched. You sit at your loom anyway. The thread is not as fine today. You use coarser warp and your beat is heavier, but you weave, and you watch the door. Across town, workshops are quiet. Not all some elders remain, looms running at full pace, but the sounds of weaving are no longer uninterrupted. One by one, your neighbors make their choices. A week passes. A representative from the guild appears at your door. Not the master himself, a journeyman. He offers to buy your cloth at a lower rate. No explanation. Just a parchment with new pricing, new fees, new deductions. You say nothing. He glances around your small room, the loom, the drying wool, the soot on the walls. "There are younger men willing to take your place, Johann," he says. "I'm sure there are," you reply, "but none who will finish this bolt before nightfall." The man leaves. He does not return. You continue weaving, slower now but steady. Days blend. Some weavers leave for other towns, Leuven, Tournai, even as far as Cologne. but you stay. Flanders is your soil as much as any field is to a farmer. Your work is not political, but it is not neutral either. Every thread you place says something, that you exist, that your labor matters, that your craft cannot be taxed into silence. Then at the end of January, word spreads through the square. The Count has summoned the guild elders to Bruges. Negotiations are underway. No one knows the details. Perhaps nothing will change. But something already has. The idea of resistance has taken root. Weavers now speak with one another across guild lines. Fullers talk to dyers. Women who spin wool in the alleys begin asking how much a finished bolt earns. Knowledge spreads, quiet and deliberate. The frost eventually lifts. Spring will come as it always does. With it, new wool, new customers, new prices. Your loom remains, worn but intact, and in its threads is the story of your defiance, not grand, not loud, but steady, repetitive, purposeful. The cloth you finish today will go to the market in Bruges. It will be bought, resold, cut, sewn into a coat. The man who wears it may never know the hands that made it, but it will keep him warm. And as you fold the bolt, press it flat and tie the cords, one thought lingers. If cloth can bind a town together, what else might be woven between those threads? Story 3. The Baker's Morning, Rising with the Dough in Late Medieval Paris. It's dark when you wake, not dark in the sense of twilight or cloud, but full, consuming darkness. The kind where the air feels heavier and your first step is guided more by habit than by sight. But you are already late by baker's standards. You are Etienne, a journeyman baker in the city of Paris in the year 1389. You work not for yourself, but for a master baker who rents space and writes from the city's powerful bakers' guild. You have no shop of your own yet. That will come, perhaps, if fortune allows and flour is plentiful. But for now, your place is beside the oven, long before the city stirs. The city is silent. You hear no footsteps, only the soft groaning of wood settling and a distant clatter as someone further down the street tends to coals. The baker's quarter, close to the Seine, stinks faintly of ash and yeast. You've lived with the smell so long, it's become comforting. You step into the communal bakehouse, a small brick building half sunken into the earth to trap heat. It's already warm. Your master has been up since midnight, feeding the fire with oak wood and scraps. The oven itself, a domed mass of stone, radiates its heat outward like a sleeping animal. It must be hot enough to crack your skin if you press too close. The air is thick, humid, already laced with the tang of fermenting dough. The flour arrived yesterday, carried in sacks from the Seine barges. It's coarse, more gray than white. The price of flour shifts weekly, controlled in part by royal officials and in part by market whims. Lately, the price has risen. Too many poor harvests, too many mouths. You've heard that riots in Dijon broke out over bread. Paris is quiet, but only just. You begin the work, mixing flour, water, salt, and a starter pulled from yesterday's leaven. No yeast as you'd think of it, just wild fermentation, coaxed carefully over days. The dough is alive, and like anything living, it can be temperamental. Too cold and it sulks. Too wet and it collapses. Too much salt and it chokes. Your hands know the weight, the texture. You knead in silence, your arms straining against the thickening mass. It's warm here, sticky, but the rhythm of kneading centers you. It is a kind of prayer, though you don't speak it aloud. Once, your father said that bread was the closest thing to grace a peasant would ever hold. You remember those words every time you fold dough over itself. By the time you shape the loaves, some round, some long, some flat, it is still dark outside, but the city begins to stir. You hear distant church bells, tolling the canonical hour of lauds just before dawn. They mark not just time, but rhythm. A baker's life is not marked by calendars, but by bells and dough. The master inspects the loaves. He says nothing but nods. That is praise enough. The oven is ready. You use a long-handled peel like a flat shovel to slide the loaves inside. The fire is banked to the side now, the embers glowing a soft orange. Timing is everything. Too soon and the bread won't rise. Too late and it will blister and crack. There's no clock, just instinct and the color of the crust. While the loaves bake, you scrub the table, sweep flour into the corner, check the next batch of leaven. The heat is constant, oppressive. Your shirt clings to your skin. You drink water from a bucket by the wall, still cool from the night air. Then the scent. Slow at first, then overwhelming, that smell. Warm crust, slightly sweet, yeasty, earthy. It fills your lungs and settles into your clothes. The loaves are done. You remove them one by one, tapping the bottoms for a hollow sound. Perfect. You line them on wooden racks to cool. The door creaks open. Your first customers arrive. A nun from a nearby convent buys 10 small loaves. A servant comes for the household of a wealthy merchant. Then come the ordinary folk, a washerwoman, a cooper's apprentice, an old man who pays in small coins. They do not speak much. Bread is not luxury. It is necessity. You do not set the price. The Parisian City Council, under royal charter, regulates the cost of bread. Too low and the baker starves. Too high and the poor revolt. There is little room for profit, only for precision. A mistake in weight, a deviation in quality, and you could be fined. Or worse, publicly punished, forced to wear the offending bread around your neck in shame. You remember the story of a baker who sold underweight loaves and was paraded through the street, the bread hanging like a noose. It is not just rumor. You've seen the wooden stocks near the hall of the provost. You do not forget them. By mid-morning, most of the bread is gone. What remains will be sold at a discount to the poorest or left to go stale and used in pottage or soup. You begin preparing dough for tomorrow. The cycle never ends. You eat your first proper meal around midday, a crust of yesterday's loaf, dipped in ale and a bit of goat cheese. It is not a feast, but it's warm and earned. By afternoon, the bakehouse cools. The fire is allowed to die. Ashes are swept. The boards are cleaned again, and you step outside for the first time since darkness. The city of Paris is wide awake now. Merchants call from stalls. Carts rattle across the stone bridges. Children chase stray dogs, and the spire of Notre Dame casts its shadow long across the river. But none of that feels as real to you as the silence of the morning oven. You've fed dozens, perhaps hundreds, and they will never know your name. But their day will begin with your bread. That is enough. Still, as you close the door behind you and begin walking home, one question comes unbidden. What happens when a city's hunger outpaces the hands that feed it? The rhythm of the bakery rarely changes, but the world beyond its walls is not so constant. It is now early spring in Paris, 1390, and the River Seine is beginning to rise with snowmelt from the countryside. You, Etienne the journeyman baker, have lived through another bitter winter of high flour prices and lean loaves. Now, the damp air carries not only the scent of thawing mud, but something heavier, unrest. The cost of flour did not fall with the frost. Each morning the lines for bread grow longer. Fewer customers pay with coins now. More offer barter buttons, bones for broth, sometimes old cloth. The master baker refuses most of it. The guild forbids barter. Paris operates under regulated trade, especially when it comes to bread. But people are growing desperate, and you see it in their eyes more than their hands. Today, a woman comes to the bakehouse holding out 2 silver pins. For 1 loaf, she pleads. My son is sick. Your master says no, not cruelly, just firmly. There are rules. If he sells 1 loaf outside regulation, he risks everything: a visit from the provost, a guild fine, or worse. You give the woman a scrap when the master's back is turned. Not a full loaf, just enough to ease the shame. Later that day, you hear news from the grain merchants near Les Halles. A royal edict has arrived from the Hotel St. Paul, where King Charles VI and his court reside. The king has ordered a freeze on bread prices, insisting that bakers not raise costs regardless of grain shortages. It's meant to keep the peace. But in truth, it threatens the livelihood of every baker in Paris. Flour still costs more. Firewood is scarce. But now you cannot raise prices to match. You must absorb the difference. Your master reads the edict aloud that evening in the bakehouse. The parchment is stiff with the king's seal, but no one bows. Instead, the other journeymen exchange glances. They've heard this before. Once the crown demanded cheap bread. Then came a riot. Then came arrests. What the king demands and what the baker can do, these are two different realities. That night you lie awake in your small shared room above the shop. Through the cracked shutters you hear voices from the street. Not revelers, not drunks. Angry voices, tired voices, hungry ones. You remember the great famine told to you by your grandmother, when the streets were filled with starving children and bakeries were burned to their foundations. That was decades ago, but memories in Paris are long. And bread is more than food. It is a symbol of survival, of fairness, of justice. The next morning, the line outside your bakehouse forms early before lauds. Some of the people in it you recognize, others you don't. Several are women with empty baskets. One has a child swaddled in old rags, coughing softly. But there are less loaves today. The flour shipment was delayed again, and your master had to stretch what remained. You baked with older leaven. The result is coarse, dry, and slightly bitter. By mid-morning, the tension grows. A man reaches for a loaf out of turn. Another shouts. Then a scuffle, someone pushes. The loaf falls trampled. Your master yells for calm. You step forward, hand raised. Then a rock hits the bakehouse wall. Just one, but it's enough. Your master slams the shutter down, ending the day's sale. You can still hear shouting as you wipe down the counters. Ashes cling to your sleeves. You've seen cracked ovens, broken windows, worse. Bakers are targets when stomachs are empty. Later you visit Notre Dame, not for prayer but for quiet. The cathedral is vast and cold, echoing with chants in Latin you barely understand. But here, at least, no one speaks of prices or flour. You sit beneath the towering stained glass and let the stone silence settle. A priest walks past. He pauses, seeing your flour-dusted tunic, and nods. Bakers are respected after all. You feed the city, even when the city forgets it. Outside, the city is louder. Near Rue Saint-Denis, a rumor spreads. A group of butchers and bakers plan to meet and petition the provost of merchants. Not to riot yet, but to explain, to plead for protection. If they are forced to keep prices low while flour rises, they'll have no choice but to close. You consider going, but what would you say? Would you speak of how you wake before the sun? Of how your skin has blistered from the oven stones? Of how you've given scraps to the hungry in secret? Would they even hear you? Instead, you return home. You sharpen the peel, wash your hands in vinegar, and lay out tomorrow's flour, what little remains. You calculate. With careful mixing, you can bake 12 full loaves, perhaps 13 if you add more water. Not enough. And as you blow out the lamp, you wonder, how long can the bread hold the weight of the city before it breaks? It is early summer now in Paris, 1390, but the heat brings no ease. The oven in your bakehouse feels more like a furnace. The firewood burns faster, the flames are harder to control, and the loaves crack if left even a moment too long. The dough rises too quickly in the humid air. You, Etienne the journeyman baker, have learned to adjust more salt, quicker shaping, shorter proofs. But each adjustment carries risk. If the bread is wrong, it's not just wasted, it's dangerous. Yesterday, you saw another baker in the stocks. His offense? Selling bread that was too light off by only a few ounces. The city's bread police, appointed by the provost of Paris, check weights at random. The offender was dragged to the square, made to wear the faulty loaf around his neck like a badge of shame. You didn't know his name, but you knew his fear. Everyone did. Your master is more cautious now. Every loaf is weighed twice. Every bag of flour is locked in a chest. You've been asked to report any irregularities in the kneading schedule. Trust is thinner than parchment. Still, each morning, The line outside the bakehouse stretches longer. The price controls imposed by the king remain in place, but the price of flour has continued to rise due to poor harvests in Burgundy and unrest along the river trade routes. Merchants hoard grain. Officials pretend not to notice. The result: there is not enough bread for the people of Paris, and yet the people are told it is the baker's fault. Today the air is thick with tension. A group of women market sellers, laundresses, mothers have gathered in the square across from the bakehouse. They are not violent, not yet, but their chants carry. Pain pour le peuple, bread for the people. It echoes down the cobbled street. You keep your head down as you carry cooling racks to the storefront. Your master tells you not to speak, just sell. Don't answer questions, don't respond. But the crowd does not want silence. One woman pushes forward, face flushed, eyes sharp. Your bread grows smaller every week, she says. Your master replies, voice thin, the flour grows more expensive. We are told you water it down, you cheat us. I bake what the guild allows, he says. Another voice from the crowd, then the guild is cheating us. You see it in their eyes, not rage but exhaustion. These are not rebels, they are mothers, widows, hungry people asking the same question you've been asking for months. Why must we suffer to eat? The crowd grows thicker. A stone strikes the wall, you retreat inside. The master orders the shutters closed. For hours you hear voices, no violence but no dispersal. The city watch finally arrives and clears the square. A few women are dragged away, but most simply vanish into alleyways. That night your bakehouse is quiet. The oven is dark. The flour sacks are empty. The master says deliveries have stopped, ships held at port by nobles demanding higher tolls. There will be no baking tomorrow. Instead, the guild calls a meeting. You attend with your master, standing in the back of the great hall near Rue de la Ferronnerie. Bakers from across the city are gathered, young, old, fat, thin, noble-backed, and dirt-smeared alike. They all wear the same look, grim resolve. The guild master, a man with polished boots and rings on his fingers, steps forward and addresses the hall. We are caught between the crown and the crowd, he says. The king demands low prices. The merchants demand high tolls. The people demand more bread than the wheat can give. And we are expected to satisfy all three. Murmurs ripple through the room. Do we strike? Someone calls out. A master baker from Saint Marcel answers, if we stop baking, they'll hang us. They've done it before. Another says, then let them hang us one by one while the rest starve. But the guildmaster raises a hand. No, we will not strike. We will not riot. We will bake. We will obey the law. But he pauses. We will also deliver a formal appeal to the crown, a declaration of facts. Let the king see the ledgers. Let the court taste the bread itself. You know it is theater. The king will not eat your bread. The court will not walk these streets. But the act of nomming the truth, however formal, still matters. And so the next day you bake. You use stale leaven stretched thin. The flour is coarse, the oven too hot. You burn your hand pulling out a cracked loaf, but you bake, because you have no choice, because to stop is to disappear. You sell fewer loaves. The line is smaller now. Word has spread that prices may rise or that bakers will close. People are afraid to rely on what might vanish. At the end of the day, your master gives you a coin, just one, less than last week, but you take it. You return to your shared room, remove your apron, and look out the small, shuttered window. The streets of Paris stretch out in tangled alleys. From here, you see the distant silhouette of Notre Dame, massive and unmoved. The Seine glimmers beyond. You wonder if, far across the river, the king has read your guild's petition. You wonder if anyone has listened. And as the sky darkens over the city of light, one final question comes to rest like ash in your mind. When bread becomes rebellion, how long before the ovens go cold forever? Story 4. Salt and Sweat, harvesting salt on the Bay of Burgneuf. You are awake before the sun, not because you must be, but because the sea speaks early. You lie in a small hut built from timber and mud, its roof weighed down with stones to resist the Atlantic winds. The salt marshes of Bergneuf Bay in western France are quiet at this hour. Only the distant hiss of the sea and the rustling of reeds fill the silence. Your name is Marin. You are a saunier, a salt worker. It is 1324, and you are one of hundreds who tend the vast salt pans that stretch across the flat, silvery coastal plain. You own no land. The pans you work belong to a local lord, who leases them to your family for a portion of the salt harvest. What remains, you trade. Your body aches as you sit up. Salt work is not hard in the way that plowing or hauling might be. It is harder in silence, in repetition, in sunburns and shallow sleep and the endless sweep of flat earth. There are no shade trees here, no rivers, just wind, water, clay, and brine. You eat a cold piece of black bread, crust hard enough to scrape your teeth. No meat this morning. Just a bit of dried apple, wrinkled and sour, left over from last season's trade. Before you leave the hut, you dip your hands in water and rub the dried salt from your eyelids. Salt crusts everything: your tools, your clothes, your skin, your soul. Outside, dawn spills slowly across the bay. The salt marshes look almost beautiful in the early light. Flat, geometric ponds reflect the pale sky grids of man-made channels carved with care over decades. The oolits, or salt pans, are your canvas. Each pond is a different stage of evaporation. Some still glisten with water, others have begun to crust with white along the edges. The work begins with inspection. You walk barefoot on narrow clay ridges between ponds. You carry a laz, a long wooden rake curved like a paddle, and a pell, a wide wooden shovel. These tools haven't changed in 100 years and won't for hundreds more. They are what salt requires. The tide has already retreated, leaving the intake channels full. The system works without pumps. Gravity and tide do the lifting. Your job is to guide and manage. Sea water flows into large reservoir ponds, then gradually through smaller crystallization pans. With each transition, the sun pulls more water into the air and leaves more salt behind. It is solar salt work, and it demands patience. You cannot rush evaporation. You can only rake, wait, and hope for sun. You check the clay gates, known as ports, that divide the ponds. Some need adjusting. A leaking gate can ruin a whole sequence, flooding one oolit and starving another. You wedge a piece of straw matting into a crack and press the gate down with your full weight. The wind begins to rise. Good. It keeps the surface water moving. Stillness leads to algae. Algae discolors the salt. You move on to the harvesting pans, where the brine is thickest. Here, the first crystals have begun to form, a dusting of white on the clay bed. You kneel, fingers brushing the salt. Not ready yet. One more day of sun. Other workers move like silhouettes in the distance. No one speaks much here. It is too vast, too quiet, and there is nothing to say that the wind hasn't already whispered. You return to your own section and begin cleaning. Algae, stray reeds, clumps of clay, any of these can contaminate a batch. You scoop them with a sieve, dump them on the bank. You skim the surface with your rake, pulling the brine slowly toward the next pond. By mid-morning, the sun climbs higher. The work changes. You begin moving water again, shifting the day's flow to new pans, adjusting the angles of gates. You check the older salt beds, where last week's harvest is still drying in the sun. The coarse crystals, called gros sel, form a thick crust. Underneath, if you're lucky, lies fleur de sel, the delicate surface bloom skimmed off by hand. But the bloom is rare, and delicate work requires time. By noon, your tunic is soaked with sweat. The salt burns small cuts on your hands, and your lips are dry despite the flask of brackish water on your belt. Lunch is a pause more than a meal. Dried fish, bread, an onion. You sit in the shadow of a crumbling wall built long ago to mark land boundaries. It does not protect you from wind or weather, but it's a place to sit. You see a merchant cart roll by in the distance, empty barrels, heading to a collection point down the bay. You may sell some of your share to him this year if he offers fair weight, but you know better than to hope for much. The taxes are high. The Lord's cut is non-negotiable, and the customs officers stationed at the nearest port take another slice for the crown. Salt is wealth. It preserves meat, seasons food, cures fish, and fills treasuries. But that wealth does not belong to you. You are a salt worker, not a salt merchant. By afternoon, the heat sharpens. The ponds shimmer in the sun as if trying to disguise their flatness. Your rake moves slower. Every motion raises dust and sweat. Then you hear it, a boy calling. Your nephew, he carries news. A new law from Nantes. Salt from certain pans will now be taxed differently depending on whether it is sold in barrels or in bulk. No explanation. The merchants will adapt, but the sauniers must measure, list, document. More work, more forms, less coin. You sigh, you do not argue. Salt does not argue either. It only waits. Evening brings wind again, cooler now. You finish your circuit, close the clay gates, and check the water levels one last time. The salt will form overnight if the weather holds. You walk back to your hut slowly, legs sore, skin crusted with dry salt. A bucket of water waits for washing, but it does not clean completely. Nothing ever does. You sit by the door, eating a piece of cheese that tastes more of age than milk. You stare at the marshes, still shimmering even in dusk. The sea is just visible beyond the horizon, a flat mirror. And as darkness falls and the air turns quiet again, a thought flickers across your tired mind. If salt built empires, why are its harvesters always forgotten? Morning brings no relief. The sun is not yet above the marshes, but already the air is heavy with heat and the scent of sea rot from the low tide. You rise slowly, brushing salt flakes from your arms and hair. They've gathered overnight no matter how often you wash. The brine seems to find its way back to you. You chew on stale bread and prepare for the day's harvest. Yesterday, the salt crust had started to form thickly in several of your oelets, and today it must be gathered. This is not the delicate fleur de sel, but the gros sel, the coarse, durable salt that makes up the bulk of your work. You begin at the far edge of the pans. With your laws, you gently drag the crystallized salt toward the edges of the clay bed. The motion is slow, deliberate. If you work too quickly, you'll gouge the clay beneath and muddy the harvest. If you work too slowly, the sun will harden the crust beyond lifting. You form long ridges of salt, like windrows, that glisten white in the rising sun. The marshes shimmer. The salt pans stretch for miles, and you are only one of hundreds here. Each family tends their own sections, each laborer repeating the same movements with practiced economy. No one sings. No one complains. The work does not allow for either. By midday, your piles are ready to be moved. You fetch a wooden sled, low and broad. It slides over the damp clay as you shovel the salt into it using a flat wooden scoop. The salt is heavy. Wet crystals cling together like sand. Every load you pull strains your back. You do this 10 times, then 10 more. Each ridge becomes a mound beside the path, your harvest for the day. Soon, you will fill barrels and roll them toward the salt barns, where they will be weighed and measured under the eye of the Lord's agent. You know what's coming next. It happens every year without fail. The Gabel. Not a word you like to hear, but it's the truth of your world. The Gabel is the royal salt tax, and its rules are as tangled as a fishnet. You do not simply harvest salt, you account for it. The amount owed to the Lord, the portion claimed by the king's officers, the weight taken by the church in kind or coin. Then, what remains for your family? The king's men do not come to the marshes. Instead, they wait at the collection points in stone buildings guarded by armed watchmen. You've never seen the king. You've never left the region, but the monarchy is in your barrel as surely as the ocean is in your pan. Last year, your cousin Jack tried to underdeclare his salt weight. said a few sacks were ruined by rain, which they were. The tax officer refused to believe him. Jacques spent a week in a small cell at the edge of the estate. When he returned, he'd lost half his salt and all his pride. You hear someone calling your name. It's Lucien, another saunier. He carries a strip of parchment, new instructions from the salt house. He reads aloud flatly. Effective immediately, salt not destined for royal warehouses must be recorded separately and marked with a seal before transport. Penalty for unmarked barrels, 10 sous and forfeiture. You stare at him. A seal from who? The clerk from Nantes, he says, or his assistant. Which one? He shrugs. Does it matter? You sigh. You'll need to wait in line again and pay the clerk again just for the right to move salt you already harvested with your own hands. The seal costs a coin, a small one, but small coins disappear faster than sweat dries. That evening you meet with your family in the storehouse. You sit on barrels marked in chalk with your name and the season. You count, quietly, carefully. You measure your share against the taxes, the seals, the cost of wood and food and tools. There is just enough if you accept that nothing unexpected will happen. You try not to think of storms, of illness, of spoilage. You push the thoughts aside. Your wife asks if you can trade some salt for cloth at the next market. The children need tunics. You nod. Then you subtract a barrel from your calculations. Then you recalculate again. Salt is your life, but it is also your math. Outside, the stars begin to appear. The marshes are dark now, windless except for the hiss of distant tide channels filling again. You can hear the sea rolling in softly to meet the land. It does not rush. It does not wait. You will rise again tomorrow, harvest again, count again, trade again. But tonight, as you sit surrounded by barrels of salt you cannot fully claim, a thought returns, one you've had before but never voiced aloud. If the king takes your salt, your coin, and your silence, what is it exactly that still belongs to you? The sun is already high when you step into the marshes, and your shadow is short and sharp. The salt piles are shimmering white today, drier than usual, good for storage, good for weight, bad for hands. Dry crystals cut like glass. You, Marin the saunier, know this pain well. Your palms bear small nicks that sting with every rake. Your forearms are tanned dark from the sun but dusted in white, a chalky signature of your trade. The salt has dried hard in the pans, crusted thick after days of uninterrupted sun. You scrape it carefully, push too hard and the clay bed cracks, pull too soon and the salt comes away wet, unformed. You work slowly, steadily, like your father did and his father before him. This morning the barrels are ready, your harvest from the last 10 days. You've weighed and measured each one, recorded their contents in charcoal marks, and sealed them as required with the clerk's wax stamp. It cost you 3 sous for the seals, another coin to expedite inspection. You're told it helps the crown keep track of the salt that belongs to France. You don't know much about France. To you, France is a tax collector who speaks formal French and never once bends to lift a rake. You and your nephew hoist the barrels onto a wooden sled and begin the slow pull toward the loading point. The wheels squeal and stick in the soft earth. Salt is heavy, worth its weight in gold, as the merchants like to say, but only after it has left your hands. At the warehouse, the scene is familiar. The clerk, dressed in clean wool, stands beneath an awning. His table is neatly arranged, scales, ledger seals, and a small chest for coin. Behind him, a stone storehouse, where barrels are sorted by tax rate, royal share, merchant purchase, peasant quota. You hand him your tally. He doesn't look up. He places a weight on the scale. Your nephew rolls the first barrel forward. The clerk hums as he works. "This one's slightly under," he says. "You'll receive a reduced rate." You protest quietly. You know the scale tilts. Everyone does. But to argue is to delay, and to delay is to risk rot, mildew, or seizure. He marks the barrel, then waves for the next. When it's done, you walk away with less than expected, but more than nothing. Your nephew is quiet. He asks, "Why do we keep doing it?" You think before answering. "Because salt keeps food from spoiling," you say, "and we keep salt from spoiling." It's not the answer he wants, but it's the one that's true. That afternoon, you trade 2 barrels for grain, onions, and linen. The grain is meager and the onions soft, but the linen is decent, coarse but clean. Your wife will turn it into tunics. Your daughter will help. The younger children will run barefoot through the marsh paths until the tide returns. You return to the marshes in the evening. The wind is cool and the salt pans are empty now, the last harvest swept clean. You check the clay ridges for damage, patch a crack with wet earth, and adjust the wooden gates for tomorrow's water flow. Even when the pans are still, the work continues. You look out across the bay. In the distance, a merchant ship is docked at the estuary port. You know it will carry your salt, not just yours, but that of dozens of workers like you to Nantes, to Bordeaux, to the Loire, maybe even across the Channel to England. By the time it reaches a market, it will have changed hands 3 or 4 times. It will be priced high, packaged neatly, praised for its purity. But no one will ask where it came from. No one will ask who woke before sunrise to shape the ponds, to check the tide, to bend their back in the heat and haul the white crystals with calloused hands. Salt preserves, but it does not preserve stories. You remember your father's voice, telling you how the marshes were once wild, how the first oolits were dug by hand in the time of Charlemagne, how monks came and built canals, how the salt made the abbeys rich while the harvesters stayed poor. And now you wonder, what will your children inherit? Not land, not gold, but perhaps the knowledge, the ancient geometry of tides and trenches, of weather and weight. Perhaps the understanding that even when you are taxed and ignored, your work matters. The salt you leave behind will never carry your name, but it will carry a piece of your day, your sweat, your time. You sit for a while at the edge of your pans, legs dangling into the ditch, the marsh breeze thick with sea air and wind-blown brine. And you ask yourself, not for the first time, is it enough to have shaped something essential, if no one ever remembers your hand was there? Story 5. One village, one plow, the burden of shared tools in 14th century Bohemia. The frost clings to the thatched roof as the first hint of dawn creeps over the distant hills. A crow calls somewhere in the trees. You rise slowly, wrapping your woolen shawl around your shoulders. Another day of waiting has begun. Your name is Tomas, and you are a peasant farmer in a small Bohemian village nestled between hills and forest, an anonymous dot in the kingdom of Charles IV, in the year 1357. Your family holds 3 narrow strips of land in the open field system, granted under obligation to the local manor. You do not own the land. You till it in exchange for dues, grain, labor, poultry, and you survive by its mercy. But ownership is not today's problem. Today's problem is the plow. There is only one heavy plow in the entire village. And it is not yours. Bohemia is a land of rich, dark soil, but that soil is heavy. To cut it, a deep-bladed plow is needed, an iron tool drawn by oxen, its frame long, reinforced with hardwood, sharp and unforgiving. The heavy plow, they call it, a gift from technology, a burden in practice. The village shares the plow like it shares so many things: oxen, pasture, ovens, disputes. There are 10 families, each with fields that need turning before spring sowing, and the season is late. The rain came too soon last month, then frost, then more rain. Now the ground is just passable, but time is short. You are 7th in line. Each family gets 2 days, if they're lucky, to turn their land. That's it. No extensions, no appeals. If the plow is late to you, or the oxen lame, or the blade cracks in the field, your season is lost. The plow was in Jerry's hands yesterday. You hear it groaning down the track around midday, pulled by a pair of wheezing oxen. Mud cakes the wheels. The blade is chipped again. One of the oxen limps. You say nothing. Jiri unloads it near the village commons, shrugs, and walks away. No words. He did what he could. You approach slowly. The plow stands awkwardly in the mud like a sleeping beast. You check the harness, the shaft, the blade. The leather binding is worn, the left handle cracked, but it will work if carefully managed. Your son helps you guide it to your plot, half a mile from the village proper. The oxen grumble with each step. One is older than the other. Both are borrowed. You've waited 5 days for this. The wind picks up as you reach your land. The soil is damp, clumped, but workable. You breathe deep. The oxen brace, and then you push. The blade bites into the earth with a wet, sucking sound. The sod turns, dark and wet beneath the frost-split topsoil. A strip of land is transformed behind you, raw, ready. The air smells of earth and cold sweat. You do this again. And again. Each furrow must be long, straight, and even. Crooked furrows waste seed. Wasted seed means poor harvest. Poor harvest means hunger. The oxen strain, the harness creaks. Your hands blister within the first hour. Your back aches after 2. The field doesn't care. It has waited all winter. Now it must be fed. At midday, your wife brings water and bread. The bread is hard, baked days ago, reused now with lard and onion. You eat while seated on a stone at the edge of the field. The oxen collapse to their knees beside you. Your wife tells you the reeve visited the village this morning. He spoke of new levies. The Lord may require more grain this year to pay for the road repair near the river, or perhaps to support the new monks building a priory in the next valley. More dues, no negotiation. You nod, you've heard this before. In the afternoon, the plow jerks sharply. You curse. A stone, half buried, has bent the blade. You stop, dig, pull it free. The blade is nicked but not broken. You continue. By nightfall, only 1/3 of your strips are turned. You have one more day with the plow before it must pass to the next family. You will need to work before dawn, after dark, and pray the oxen hold. You return to your hut, muscles on fire. Your son sleeps already, curled under furs. You chew a strip of salted pork and stare at your hands. They tremble slightly, not from cold but from urgency. The plow is both tool and tyrant. It gives you a chance, but it never gives enough. And as you close your eyes that night, exhausted and aching, one thought churns with the same rhythm as your field. What happens when too many hands must borrow the same tool, but no one has time to share it? You are awake before the sun, again. The small fire in your hut has burned low. Cold air seeps through the gaps in the timber walls. Your hands ache, stiff with yesterday's work. You stretch your fingers slowly. Blisters have formed beneath calluses. There is no time to rest. Today is your last day with the plow. Outside, frost still clings to the furrows you carved yesterday. The blade sits propped against the side of the cart, dull from stone and strain. You squint at the eastern sky. A sliver of pink light promises clear skies and more time. You break your fast with thin porridge scraped from the bottom of the pot. It is barely warm. There is no butter today, no herbs, but it fills your stomach just enough. Your son, barely old enough to pull a full yoke, follows behind you as you guide the plow and oxen back to your field. The wind cuts across the open land, but the animals are quiet. They seem to know the urgency. The plow sinks into the wet soil, heavy and unwilling, but it moves. You whisper to the oxen as you walk, encouragement, half prayer, half command. The sun rises, you plow. By mid-morning, your arms feel as though they no longer belong to your body. You pull, push, curse, and guide with each furrow. The second strip is more even than the first. You've found your rhythm again. But the third, it's uphill, harder. The blade slides sideways in the mud. You curse again, louder this time. Your wife arrives with water. She sees your face and says nothing. She knows what this day means. You only get this time, this tool, this chance. The oxen slow after midday. Their pace turns sluggish. You press on. There is no option. You pass other villagers along the road, men watching your work with quiet impatience. You know what they're thinking. He's behind. He won't finish in time. You try not to hear them. Then something snaps. The plow jerks forward. You fall hard, knees slamming into cold soil. The left trace has broken, a leather strap worn thin, now torn completely. One ox stands frozen. The other turns slightly. The yoke drags. You sit up slowly. Pain spreads down your thigh. The plow lies sideways. Soil clings to your tunic. Your hands shake. Your son runs to help, already tugging the broken strap free. "We can tie it," he says. You nod, though you know the truth. A tied strap won't hold long. Not with the weight of the blade. Not with a slope like this. You lash it together anyway, fibers of old rope, torn fabric, and desperation. It holds barely. By late afternoon, the last strip is half done. You work with fire in your chest. Every furrow you don't cut today will lie empty. Every missed patch is a mouth hungry in autumn. You push until your arms go numb, until your feet bleed into your boots, until the sky dims and the wind grows cold again. When the final row is turned, it's dark enough that you can barely see the soil, but it is done. You and your son walk the plow back to the common store. The oxen drag slowly, breathing heavy. One limps. You've pushed them too far, but not as far as you pushed yourself. You pass Janik, the next man in line. He stands waiting by the store, arms crossed. "You took too long," he says quietly. You say nothing. "I've 2 strips and a wife with fever," he adds. "Could have used a better plow than this wreck." Still you say nothing. You hand him the reins, the blade, the cracked handle. You walk away. Your hut is dark when you return. The fire is lit, but low. Your wife has saved the best of the evening stew for you: barley, onion, a single strip of pork fat. It tastes better than anything you've eaten in weeks. You sit with your son by the fire. He asks if the harvest will be enough this year. You look at your hands. You think of the broken strap, the chipped blade, the hours stolen by need. You think of the rain clouds that gather too early, or the pests that come in July, or the reeve demanding more than you have. You answer honestly, if nothing else goes wrong. That's always the hope and the fear. Outside, the plow sits in another man's hands now. Tomorrow it will turn another field under another sky for another family. You do not resent them. But you wonder, what would this village be if every man had his own plow and his own time to use it? The fields are quiet now. It is late spring in Bohemia, 1357, and the wind no longer bites. The rain has stopped for now, and your furrows, turned in desperation and pain, have begun to sprout. Green blades rise in thin lines, following the path your plow cut just days before. You, Tomas, walk the edges of your land with your son, eyes scanning for signs of poor growth, bare patches, insect damage, mold. Nothing yet, but the season is early. The soil forgets nothing, and neither do you. You've returned the plow. It now sits in Janik's hands, and after him it will pass to the widow on the north road, then to the cobbler's cousin, then back to the commons until next year. The iron blade will not rest, though its handle is cracked and its straps are fraying. The plow is mended again and again by different hands with different scraps, but always for the same purpose: to move the earth that feeds the village. You resent it. You depend on it. You mourn for the days you lose waiting for it. This season you finished your planting, barely, but others won't. Your neighbor lost a strip to flooding. Janik, bitter after receiving the plow too late, sowed seed in poorly turned soil. You hear him cursing in the night. Others have started speaking in low voices about building a second plow, but it would require iron, a trained smith, and oxen, none of which your village possesses. Or rather, not alone. That's when the idea begins to spread. What if 3 villages shared tools? What if you pooled money, not much, just a little from each family to commission another plow from the ironworks near Kutna. Or what if each household paid a small fee to the smith in grain after harvest to form a coffer for repairs? A few elders scoff. It's always been done this way, one says. The earth waits for no meetings. But others, especially the younger farmers, listen. They are tired of waiting, tired of watching their futures held up by a missing strap or a late return. They speak of cooperation, of common rights, of tools as shared power, not shared weakness. For now, it's only talk. But it plants a seed. Later in the week, you meet with the reeve. He walks with a scroll tucked under one arm, freshly marked with the manor's latest obligations. He says the Lord is demanding more barley this year to help supply a merchant caravan heading toward the Polish border. He mentions tolls, horses, taxes, as if they were weather, not choices. You nod. You know what you must give. But inside, a frustration simmers not just with the dues, but with the system beneath them. A village that depends on a single tool is a village always on the edge of failure. That night, sitting near the hearth, you listen as your son carves a new yoke pin from birch. He says it's better than the one that snapped last week. He tests it against the old socket and smiles when it fits. You realize, for the first time, that your children may not just inherit your work, they may change it. They may demand more than just survival. They may demand the right to own their own tools, to choose when and how they work, to organize, to resist. Not today, not yet. But one day. You step outside. The sky is clear, filled with stars. The soil is silent now, but you know it remembers every hand that turned it, every drop of sweat, every crack of leather and splash of seed. And as you look across the fields, each strip carved with the same old plow, each row a story of shared necessity, you wonder. When we carve the same furrow together for too long, do we forget how to carve a new path on our own? Story 6. Threadbare but proud, a peasant woman's role in medieval Sweden. The first light of morning slips through the cracks in the wooden walls, touching your rough-woven blanket. It's cold. Not sharply so, but the kind of cold that creeps into your bones, the kind that never fully leaves even in spring. You are in Jeged, a bondkvinna, a peasant woman living in the central countryside of medieval Sweden, in the year 1312, in a village somewhere between Uppsala and the vast northern pine forests. The days are long now. The sun rises early and sets late, stretching your hours of work but not your strength. You sit up slowly on the straw-stuffed mattress, careful not to wake the youngest child beside you. Your husband, Eric, has already gone. You heard him before dawn boots on earth, the scrape of an axe, the cough that never quite leaves him. He's cutting timber near the edge of the bog or checking the trap lines. You, however, stay behind, not for rest. Your realm is here, hearth, wool, field, and child. The cottage is small, logs moss-chinked with a low roof that smokes even when it shouldn't. There is no chimney, just a smoke hole in habit. Inside, everything is dark wood and dried herbs. Thyme, juniper, and yarrow hang from the rafters, half for medicine, half for scent. You pull on your linsey-woolsey tunic, patched in 3 places, and wrap a shawl around your shoulders. You step outside into morning light, feet bare in the grass. The yard smells of earth and sheep. The flock is small, only 6, but they are yours. Not legally, not entirely. The land belongs to a local landbow who leases it from a store-bond, who owes loyalty to a minor noble you've never seen. But the sheep, you tend them, you shear them, you spin their wool. They know your voice. 2 are ready to be sheared. You tie their legs gently and begin, using shears so old their handles have been wrapped in leather again and again. The wool comes away in uneven clumps. You'll clean it later, card it, spin it on your spindle. The thread won't be fine, but it will be strong. Inside the cottage, your eldest daughter starts the fire. She's 11, sharp-eyed and quick-handed. She prepares a pot of barley and root vegetables, scraped from the last of the cellar's winter stores. The stew is bland but warm. You eat quickly and return to your work. There is no women's work here, not truly. There is just work. You keep the sheep. You tend the garden. You manage the household. You mend clothes, twist rope, mix tinctures, smoke meat, and carry water. You assist with births, animal and human, and wash the bodies of the dead. You are a wife, a mother, a worker. You are also something else, indispensable. In this part of Sweden, far from the royal court in Stockholm or the monasteries of the south, life is not governed by parchment. It is governed by season, soil, and silence. You know how much sunlight remains just by the length of the shadow on the field. You know when it will rain by the feel of the air beneath your fingernails. You know which bark helps a fever and which root stops bleeding. In the afternoon, you gather nettles. You wear gloves last year's wool, frayed at the thumbs, but the nettles still sting. You blanch them later, chop them into the barley stew. Green food at last. You check the bee-skep woven straw, warm and humming. You won't gather honey today. It's too early. But you whisper thanks anyway. Bees don't listen, perhaps, but tradition matters. Later, your husband returns, dragging a bundle of kindling and a rabbit in a snare. He's muddy, tired, quiet. You nod to each other. Words are rare. You've been married 16 years. You don't need them. As evening falls, the children gather near the hearth. Your daughter spins while your youngest tries to catch fireflies in a wooden bowl. You hum a tune from your childhood, a lullaby of wind and pine, sung by women who lived and died before your memory began. Your hands never stop. Even now, by firelight, you stitch a torn hem. Your fingers are cracked and blackened from soil, but precise. You glance out the window. The sky is not yet dark. The light lingers longer here in the north, even after the sun sets, a twilight that holds its breath, waiting. You think of the months ahead of flax pulling, hay cutting, preserving berries, patching boots, preparing for winter again. You will work until the cold returns. Then you will work harder. But tonight you rest a little. And as you blow out the rushlight, you wonder not with bitterness, just with quiet curiosity. How many generations of women have shaped this land, yet left no names behind? It is late summer now, and the fields are heavy with green. The rye is nearly tall enough to cut, and the garden gives more than it takes. There is food if you work for it. You in Jeged are doing what you've always done, tending to the needs of everyone else before your own. The mornings are no less early, the evenings no less long. You no longer count hours. You count tasks completed, fires kept burning, children kept well. Your fingers ache from spinning flax. You've moved on from wool for now, though the carded fleece waits in a sack for winter. Flax is finer, less forgiving. It takes patience. You soak the stalks, beat them, dry them in bundles. Then you break and comb and twist. It's a process handed down through the hands of women, not recorded, not taught in schools, just known. And you know it well. Your daughter learns beside you. She has small hands but clever ones. She drops the spindle often. You smile, but you do not correct her. The thread will teach her. Across the fields you see men with scythes cutting hay in long rows. Your husband is among them. You brought them water earlier in the day, cool, drawn from the spring beneath the hill, carried in wooden buckets slung across your back. You left a strip of cloth soaked with vinegar, a remedy against heat sickness. You said nothing. You knew they'd understand. In the village, news spreads. A child was born yesterday to the smith's wife. You bring her a wrapped bundle of linen, a gift. She thanks you in tears. Her hands are still red. The child is small but loud. The father is absent, called to repair an iron gate for the nearby estate. He will return by week's end if he can. You take no coin. No one expects it. But a week from now she will bring you fish or a handful of dried lingonberries or simply a favor in return. That is the true currency here. Reputation, trust, memory. Your own mother is older now. She lives with your brother in a village 2 valleys away. You haven't seen her since spring. You send word through a passing trader scratched on birch bark and tied with twine. You tell her the garden is good, the bees are strong, and the children are well. You don't tell her that your back hurts more this year, that your oldest daughter cried in the field last week, that sometimes, when the wind is too strong, the house creaks in a way that feels like warning. She already knows. That night, as the stew simmers carrot, onion, dried fish, you sit outside and mend your husband's cloak. The wool is thick but frayed at the edges. You restitch the collar and rub in tallow to keep it dry. He sits beside you, silent. You talk little in the evenings. There is comfort in the absence of words. Suddenly the village bell rings, once, then twice. That's unusual. It's not a festival day, not market, not a wedding or a funeral. Bells ring for danger or decree. You leave your work and gather with the others near the meeting post. A rider has come from the nearest estate, a message. There has been unrest in the south, bands of men, possibly mercenaries, moving through the countryside. A recent fire burned several outbuildings on a noble's land not far from here. They're suspected to be thieves. The message urges all villages to guard livestock, tools, grain stores, to remain watchful. No one says it aloud, but you all know what it means. The men may go to defend if called. The women will be left behind, to guard what remains. You remember a tale your mother once told of a woman named Ragnfrid who stood with a pitchfork in front of her farm when raiders came. They left. No one knows if it was fear or mercy. You walk home that night and check the lock on the grain shed, weak as it is. You make sure the shovel is near the door, the axe freshly oiled. You tell your daughter nothing, but she senses the tension in your silence. She asks, "Will Papa be sent away?" You say, "We'll see." She asks, "If he goes, what do we do?" You place your hand on hers and answer honestly, "We do what we always do." And it's true. You have raised children and animals and fields. You've lifted timbers and buried kin. You have kept the home standing while the men went to serve, to chop, to haul, to hunt. And when they returned to something still standing. That was you. You sleep lightly that night. The wind rattles the roof, the dog growls once, then silence. And in that silence, one thought returns again, as it always does. If women are the ones who hold the world together in the quiet spaces, why are we remembered only when it falls apart? The threat never came. The armed men, whoever they were, passed by your valley without incident. Perhaps they were real. Perhaps the stories were simply noble panic, amplified and handed down like so many edicts from stone halls where no flax is spun and no root cellars are dug. You and Jeged never stopped preparing. It is now autumn and the air tastes of smoke and wind. The harvest is in barely enough but enough. The grain bins are sealed. The root vegetables are buried in sand-lined barrels. You've dried mushrooms, smoked fish, salted lamb. The shelves in the loft grown with bundles of dried herbs, tied neatly in rose, sage, meadowsweet, juniper. This is the women's winter work, the unseen architecture that keeps the household alive through snow and silence. Your daughter helps more now. She is 12 and strong. She lifted the last of the oat sacks herself yesterday, arms straining but face proud. You saw yourself in that moment, not the tired hands or weather-worn face you've grown into, but the sharp-eyed girl you once were. Braids neat, voice clear, certain of nothing but willing to try everything. Your husband has grown quieter with the years. The cough has settled into his chest, but he still walks the traps and sharpens tools. When the sleep begins, he will patch the thatch, fix the fence, and butcher the last pig before Yule. You will do the rest. You've begun preparing winter cloth. The wool you sheared in spring has been cleaned, carded, spun. The warp threads are on the loom now, strung tightly in even lines. You hum a low song as you work, your shuttle clicking back and forth, feet pressing the petals in rhythm. The weaving isn't fast, but it's steady. The resulting fabric will become a tunic for your youngest and mittens for your daughter. You've even saved a bit of dyed wool, red with madder root, just enough for a band at the hem. Decoration is rare, but not forbidden. You make it because pride is not a luxury, it's survival. People think peasant women have no pride. They think you toil, faceless, under law and lord and labor. But pride lives in your work, in the perfect row of stitches in a garment that will last 5 winters, in the birch bark boots you lined so no frostbite touched small toes, in the time you held a neighbor's hand as she birthed her 3rd child in a storm. Pride is what keeps your voice level when a visiting noble steward stops at your farm and asks what you owe. You answer evenly, accurately. You know the numbers. You remember the ledger lines in your head because you've lived them, not just written them. The steward respects you, or fears you. The difference is not always clear. In the long dark of December, you tell stories to your children of the old gods, of the saints, of your mother's mother, and the time the cows froze, and she saved one by sleeping in the barn beside it for 3 nights. Your children laugh wide-eyed and ask if it's true. You say, of course. But the truth is, you do know it doesn't matter. Stories preserve what records don't. No monk will write your name. No scribe will trace your lineage in gold. But your daughter knows how to weave. Your son knows how to bind a wound. Your neighbor remembers that you came when her roof leaked and no one else did. That is your monument. Years from now, when the snow has melted and the grandchildren of today's children walk these fields, they may not say your name, but they will live because of what you did quietly, daily, relentlessly. They will gather herbs the way you did. They will tell a sick child, "My mother once made a tea for that." They will plant flax and whisper, "Let it grow straight." They will light fires with your old flint. And when they look out at the fields in early spring and see the sheep grazing along the stone walls, they may ask, "Who first made all this work?" And though the answer may be no more than a shrug and a name carved on no stone, the truth will remain. It was you. Story 7. Chickens, Charcoal, and Chores, A Child's Day in the Rhineland. You are Matthias, and you are 9 years old. You live in a small hamlet in the Rhineland, near the edge of the forest, not far from the river. It is 1363, though you don't know that. You've never held a piece of parchment, let alone written a date. The year to you is not marked in numbers, it's marked in tasks, in how the days smell and what needs to be done. It's the season of mud and birds, which means early spring. You wake when the light turns gray, not when it turns gold. The chickens are already loud. The coals in the hearth are warm, not hot. Your blanket is wool but thin. Your toes are cold. You wiggle them until they're less cold, and then you stand. Your mother is already working. She's kneading bread. She doesn't look up, but you know she knows you're awake. You dress quickly, a tunic that was your brother's, now yours. You pull it over your head. You don't bother with shoes. You'll need to find them later, probably near the stable or under the bench. But for now, your feet are bare. It's easier that way. The chores begin. First, the chickens. You unlatch the coop. They pour out like a loud, feathered wave. You scatter seed and broken grain. They peck and flap and fight. One hen chases you, angry from yesterday. You don't know why. Chickens are mysterious. Next, the latrine bucket. You carry it out back and dump it into the trench near the trees. You hold your breath. You fail. You gag anyway. Then you wash the bucket in the stream. By then the sun is higher. Your father comes in with a bundle of wood. He smells like smoke and leather. His face is lined, his beard short. He nods at you. That's the closest thing to good morning in your house. He asks you to help him with the charcoal mound. You do not like this part. Charcoal making is dangerous. You've only watched before from a distance, but today he lets you close. You walk with him to the clearing where yesterday's mound smoldered all night under layers of sod and ash. The ground here is warm, the air acrid. He teaches you how to use the long stick to test the pile, how to check for smoke, how to press your palm to the side and feel if it's still burning under the shell. Don't breathe deep, he says. It bites the inside of your lungs. You nod, you do not breathe deep. He uncovers part of the mound. Inside, black sticks perfectly burned, not ash, not logs, charcoal. They will be sold to the smith in the next village. You help stack them carefully into baskets. The splinters stab, but you say nothing. He sees your hands, though. He gives you his gloves. This for you is love. Back home, your mother has cooled the bread. You eat it with a smear of soft cheese and a piece of last season's apple, shriveled but sweet. You sit on the stoop with your sister, who sings to herself and braids grass. You do not know much of the world beyond the trees, but you know how to carry water without spilling it. You know the difference between a hawk and a kite. You know how to find a hen's hidden nest and how to sit perfectly still so a mouse forgets you're there. You are 9 years old, but you already have a job, many jobs, not because you're a servant, because everyone must work. Children too, especially children. In the afternoon, your father shows you how to fix a broken fence post. The axe is heavy. You help hold the wood steady while he swings. You don't flinch anymore. When you walk to the stream for water, you stop to look for quail eggs in the grass. You find none, but you bring back a feather and give it to your mother. She smiles and tucks it into her braid. Before supper, you feed the goats. They knock you over again. You laugh. You're used to it. Supper is barley with bits of dried pork. Your mother saved a slice of onion for each of you. It burns your mouth in the best way. Your father says little, as always. Your sister hums. The fire pops. After the bowls are scraped and stacked, your mother tells a story. It's the one about the old woman who turned into a tree to hide from wolves. You've heard it before, but you ask for it again. She tells it slower this time. You close your eyes. You don't fall asleep, but you wish you could live inside the story for a while. Then it's time for bed. You lie beside your brother. He's already snoring. The fire's almost out. You pull the blanket to your chin and think about chickens and smoke and whether the quail eggs will come back tomorrow. And just before you drift off, your last thought is small and strange. Will I always be a boy who knows more about goats than books? The rooster's late this morning. You wake first, not to sound but to light, soft and gray, slipping through the gaps in the shutters. Your brother still sleeps, mouth open, face buried in wool. You roll out from under the blanket, land on the hard-packed earth, and stretch until your ribs crack like twigs. It rained in the night. You can smell it. You are Matthias, still 9, but today you feel older. The chickens greet you with complaints. They do that every morning as if each day were a surprise. You feed them quickly, then check the goat pen. One of the kids has squeezed through the fence again. You find it chewing a rag someone dropped behind the smokehouse. You drag it back by the horns. It bleats once, indignant. Your mother says the tax collector is coming this week. She doesn't say it with fear, just with fact. The tithe must be paid. Eggs, barley, dried meat, whatever the village agreed upon last winter. You don't know what taxes are exactly, but you know what they do. They make adults talk with tight mouths and stare at walls when they think no one's looking. After breakfast porridge and the heel of yesterday's bread, your father takes you into the forest. He doesn't say why, you just follow. You've been here before, of course. The woods are always near, but this time you go deeper. The moss is thick underfoot. The light is green and heavy. The trees creak like old ships. He doesn't speak until you reach the clearing. A single charcoal pit, cold and blackened from weeks ago, sits like a scar in the middle. Around it are felled trees, barked and stripped. He gestures to them with the axe. Cut them to length, he says. You hesitate. He hands you the hatchet. Your first swing is too soft. He says nothing. Your second connects better, still not enough. By the third, your hands burn. The bark is wet. The handle blisters your palms, but you do not stop. Not because he tells you, but because you don't want to disappoint the silence between you. When the trees are cut, he begins stacking. You copy him. Logs first, then branches in a round stack. You pack it with damp moss, cover it with turf. You both know it will burn for days if it's lit right. It will turn wood into wealth if the wind doesn't ruin it. Your father says one thing on the way home. You worked. That's enough. Back in the village, your sister is dyeing wool. The pot bubbles black with alder bark. She lets you stir it. The smell is strange wood and rot and something sharp like vinegar. You ask her where she learned it. From mother. Where did she learn? Your sister shrugs. From her. You nod, you understand. There are no schools here, no letters, no scrolls, but every tree is a lesson, every tool is a teacher, every mistake cuts a little knowledge into your skin. You help your mother hang the dyed yarn. It drips onto your toes, you don't mind. In the afternoon, the parish priest visits. He speaks in a French-tinged Latin that no one fully understands, but he smiles kindly. He blesses the house, sprinkles water on the animals, and says a prayer for good harvests. He asks if you know your pater noster. You do. You say it fast. He nods, gives you a dry apple, and tells you to be obedient. You say yes. Later, you throw the apple core into the chicken yard. They fight over it like wolves. Before evening, your father returns to the forest. You do your own chores without being told. You carry water, sweep the floor, check the drying charcoal. Your mother pats your shoulder when she sees your hands. The blisters are deep now. She mixes a paste of honey and ash and wraps your palms with linen strips. You feel proud, even as it stings. That night you sit outside alone. The goats are quiet, the trees murmur. The stars come slowly like shy animals. You think about the trees you cut, the heat of the pit, the priest's prayer. You think about the wool turning black in the pot. You think about how everyone here knows things you don't yet, but that someday you will. And a question drifts up in the stillness, small but persistent. If everything I need to know is already here, what waits for me beyond the trees? By the time the first frost comes, you already know how to carry fire without dropping it. You, Matthias, are still only 9, but no one speaks to you as if you are. In the village, there are no ages for work, only readiness. You've now stacked wood beside every hearth. You've mended fences, tied bundles of herbs, skinned rabbits under your father's eye. You still lose the chickens sometimes, but now you know how to get them back. And when your mother fell sick for 3 days last week, it was you who stirred the stew, fetched water, and tucked in your sister's braids by firelight. You are not praised for it. You don't expect to be. You're learning the unwritten code of your world. To do is to be. To endure is to belong. Your father's charcoal mound finished burning 2 days ago. The yield was good. He sold 3 sacks to a traveling smith who stopped with a cart full of metal scraps, broken tools, and news from a town you've never seen. The man gave you a copper coin, just for stacking the baskets well. You showed it to your sister, then tucked it into a knot in the wall where you keep your treasures. There's nothing to buy, but still it is yours. Winter creeps in slowly here. The trees go bare, the light thins, the air changes. Your mornings begin in darkness now. The first breath from your mouth steams in the cold air inside your own home. The hearth fire is kept alive overnight with care, banked under ash, coaxed back to life at dawn. Sometimes it doesn't catch. When that happens, you run to the neighbor's house, barefoot through frost, carrying a clay bowl, asking for a live coal. No one says no. The fire is communal in a way. That's something no priest ever told you, but you know it's true. Your family prepares for the snow in ways you've only recently begun to understand. Not just food, but tasks. Shoes are mended, cords retwisted, the wheel of the cart checked and checked again. You rub oil into the leather harness straps. You soak beans. You sharpen the hatchet on the stone until your fingers sting. You don't ask why you must do these things. You simply know, if we don't do them now, we'll suffer later. That's the difference between children here and children in the stories told by traveling minstrels. The songs speak of boys on horses and golden coins. You know only goats and frost. And somehow you prefer it that way. Your sister fell today while bringing in wood, twisted her ankle. She cried briefly. You carried her inside on your back. She laughed at that. You're not that strong, she said, but she held on tightly. Later, your mother let you help with the salve, beeswax, pine resin, and dried nettles. You spread it over her swelling and wrapped it tight with wool. Your mother said nothing, but her eyes softened. That night, you're the last to sleep. You lie in bed, watching the fire's orange light flicker on the beams above. The wind outside presses against the shutters. You hear the goat bleat once, then quiet. You think about the woods, about the road the smith took, about what lies in the direction of the sun when it rises. You do not want to leave, but a part of you wants to know what else there is to do, beyond chickens and charcoal. Then again, maybe knowing how to keep a fire alive is more useful than anything found in books. Maybe, just maybe, the world begins in a village like yours and only grows outward when small feet dare to walk it. You pull the blanket closer. Your sister sleeps soundly now. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will begin with frost and firewood. And you will be ready. Because, whether the world sees it or not, you already carry the weight of something larger than childhood. Responsibility. Story 8. The Last Bucket of Salt, a journey to the Polish salt mines. The cold is not what you expect. Not the sharp wind of the Vistula or the numbing chill from a Krakow winter, but a deep, damp cold that seeps from stone. It clings to your bones in a way that doesn't lift, even after hours above ground. You are Jacob, a salt hauler's apprentice, 14 years old, and you are descending into the Wieliczka salt mine, sometime around 1385. The wooden ladder is slick under your fingers, worn smooth from thousands of hands. You grip tightly, pressing your foot against each rung. Around you, oil lamps swing, carried by older men with lined faces and blackened fingernails. The air is thick, not dirty yet but close. It smells of sweat, rope, and a faint tang of salt. This is your first real descent. You've carried buckets up before, loaded carts, scrubbed tools. But now, for the first time, you will go down to the working levels, the echoing tunnels where salt has been cut, carved, and hauled for over a century. There is no ceremony, just a nod from your master and a word. Don't touch anything that sparkles. He means it. Salt crystals are not for decoration. They are wealth. They are survival. They are also dangerous. As you reach the tunnel floor, your boots crunch over dry salt dust. The walls shimmer faintly in the lamplight, gray-white like bone. Stalactites drip brine. In some corners, faint carvings mark old shafts and flooded galleries. You've been told not to ask about the flooded shafts. You obey. A miner passes you, hauling a sled loaded with rough salt blocks. His back is hunched, shirt soaked through. His beard is crusted white. He does not look at you. His world is forward motion and aching muscles. Your master, Shimon, hands you a pickaxe not for mining but for clearing rubble. That's your job today. One of the side galleries collapsed partially in the night. You will help dig it out. You learn quickly that there is no silence in the mine. Only a dull, persistent hum of picks against salt, of chains dragging, of men grunting and coughing and working in rhythm. It is a world of motion, a world of routine and ritual shaped by necessity. You pass a shrine carved into the rock. A saint with a salt-crusted face, hands folded in prayer. Someone left a flower there half dry. The shrine marks the place where 2 men died years ago. Roof collapse. You say nothing, but you pause for a breath. Everyone does. You labor for hours. The salt is heavier than you expected. It doesn't crumble like sand. It fights you, resists the pick, clings to the tunnel. Your arms ache quickly. Your gloves tear. Blisters bloom. No one offers help, not from cruelty, but because no one here has spare strength. At midday, the miners break for bread and water. You sit against the wall, salt dust covering your tunic. Your hands shake as you eat. The bread is hard, but the water tastes sweet. You ask an older miner how long he's worked here. He squints, shrugs, and says, "Since before your father was born." You ask if it's always like this. He replies, "It gets harder." Then he smiles. One of his teeth is black. As the light from the shaft above dims, you wonder about time. You have no way to measure it down here. No sun, no stars, no bells, just the drip of brine and the scrape of picks. Before returning to the surface, Shimon takes you aside. He points to a narrow tunnel, barely the width of a cart. "See that?" he says. You nod. "That's where we follow next week. A new vein, could be deep, could flood." You swallow hard. "What do I do?" He looks at you. You carry the salt. You remember the exits. You don't panic. You nod again, though your chest is tight. As you climb the ladder back up, legs trembling, lungs aching, you carry a small sack of rock salt chips, your first real load. It's not for sale. It will be ground into brine for curing fish, preserving meat, softening hides. This salt is life, every grain hard-earned. Back above ground, the air is colder but clean. The sky looks wide and strange. You hand the sack to your master. He weighs it in his hand, then gives you a nod. That's it, no praise, no pat on the back, just a small recognition you returned. You sit alone near the loading platform, watching ox carts trundle by, wheels coated in white dust. Your arms still shake. Your palms sting. Your hair smells like brine and smoke. And in that moment, a question rises when you can't ask aloud. How many lives are spent, buried grain by grain, in places no one will ever see? It has been 8 days since your first full descent. You are Jacob, apprentice hauler, and already your shoulders carry weight they didn't know before. You now descend without hesitation, your feet sure on the slick ladder rungs, your hands calloused in the right places. Your arms no longer tremble from the load of a sack or a sled. Your back aches still, but differently. It's not pain, it's adjustment. The mine has accepted you, not welcomed, not embraced, but tolerated, and in a place like Wieliczka, that is enough. The tunnels stretch far now, deeper than you imagined. Some twist for hours, some descend into darkness that has swallowed light for decades. The oldest miners talk of shafts that reach down nearly 100 fathoms, where strange winds stir and water drips from stone older than cities. You've seen more of the mine now. The chapel carved from salt, its floor as smooth as ice, its walls glistening with holy figures. The brine pools, glassy and black, where men once drowned carrying sacks too heavy to abandon. The salt staircases, so finely carved they creak like wood. Even the salt horses, not creatures, but sculptures where men leave pebbles in place of prayers. Every chamber feels older than time, not ruined, just used like the inside of a lived-in boot. Your tasks remain humble. You haul the smaller loads, maintain the pulleys, collect tool heads for sharpening. But today, you've been given a new role, watching the runners. These boys smaller than you scurry along planks and beams, carrying messages between crews. Fast, clever, fearless, but also easily lost. Today, one is missing. A boy named Mikolaj, 6 years old, quick as a weasel. He was last seen entering the side shaft near St. Kinga's well. Your master sends you with 2 others to find him. You carry a lantern in one hand and a length of rope in the other, not for climbing, for retrieval. The shaft is narrow, unused in months. Salt dust piles in the corners. The air is stale, too dry. Your boots scrape along the wood planks laid to protect the carts. You call softly, "Mikolaj." No answer. You find him 10 minutes later, curled in a corner, one ankle twisted badly, clutching a handful of carved salt chips. His face is pale, his lips cracked. You kneel. He tries to stand but can't. He hands you the salt with a trembling hand. Don't let them take it, he whispers. It's from the altar. You look at the chips salt carved into flower shapes. He must have found an old shrine, one of the forgotten ones. Miners leave tokens there, offerings to Kinga or Saint Barbara. You say nothing, you pocket the pieces. You lift him gently and carry him back. He is silent the whole way. Later, in the surface infirmary, a simple hut near the loading station, your master asks what he was doing. You answer he was praying. The master nods, says no more. That evening, as the carts creak down the road, you stay late in the chapel tunnel. There are candles lit, though no one else is there. Salt saints watch from their alcoves. You kneel by the altar like the older miners do, and you leave one of Michelad's flower chips near a carved likeness of Saint Barbara, patron of miners. You don't say a prayer, you don't know any, but you think hard and long and deeply. And maybe that is a kind of prayer. When you return to the work tunnel, you pass a team preparing a new gallery. They are silent, focused. The salt here is darker, richer, more valuable, but more dangerous too. The walls weep with brine. The roof groans softly. Someone hammers a cross into the wall, just a mark, quick and crude. A warning, this salt may cost blood. You learn that these miners name each gallery, not by saints or nobles, but by experience. The Wailing Tunnel, Stumble Shaft, the Hollow Room, and one they only call the Lost. Every name has a story, every tunnel a memory. You walk past them now not as a visitor, but as a witness. You've begun to dream in salt and rope and windless silence. And tonight, as you drift to sleep near the flickering hearth of the apprentice barracks, one thought holds you. Is it the salt we carry, or the memory of those who shaped it before us? You are Jacob, and the salt has become part of you. It's in your skin, your hair, your clothes. It clings to the creases of your hands and laces every cut with its sting. When you breathe deeply, you taste it in the back of your throat. You no longer notice the pain, not because it's gone, but because it's become routine, like the weight of a shirt or the ache of bare feet after a long walk. It is winter and the mind does not sleep. It never does. Above ground, Krakow freezes. The market's empty. The fields are hard as iron, but the salt must keep flowing. Caravans wait at the depot. Towns wait for their barrels of brine and salt-cured meat. Salt not only preserves food, it preserves trade, treaties, and power. Salt keeps kings in palaces and keeps you in the tunnels. Today, you're helping clear a collapsed passage. 3 days ago, a team opened a new gallery near the south tunnel too fast, too deep. The ceiling gave. One man died. One remains trapped behind a wall of broken timber and salted rubble. You don't know him well. His name is Matthews. He once showed you how to fold rope to carry heavier loads without slicing your palms. That is all. You work alongside a dozen others, picks and shovels rising and falling like clockwork. The timber groans under each strike. The salt dust hangs heavy, even with bellows pushing in air from above. Hours pass. At one point, you think you hear tapping from beyond the wall. The others hear it too. It could be nothing. It could be wind. It could be him. You dig harder. The light of your lantern seems weak today. You think of the chapel tunnel, where salt chandeliers hang above a carved altar, and how it never feels dark there. But here, the darkness creeps into the corners of your eyes even when the flame burns bright. Your master orders a pause. The ceiling needs to be reinforced. You take water and sit by a side wall. Your hands twitch, still working in rhythm even when empty. And that's when you notice it. A carving, barely visible, hidden behind a crust of gray-white salt. You scrape gently. A face emerges, faint, worn, carved long ago, a miner or maybe a saint. Someone wanted it remembered. Above it, scratched in crude Latin, Hic laborat homo ut reges vivent. Here works the man that kings may live. You read slowly, tracing the letters with your fingertips. You don't need a priest to translate. You understand it fully now. The tunnel opens an hour later. They reach Matthews, alive barely. He's pulled out like a sack of grain, breathing shallow, eyes blinking against the sudden flare of lamplight. He clutches a piece of salt in his hand the size of a coin. No one asks why. We all take something when we think it might be our last. That night the mine is quieter. Even the older men speak softly. You help wash Matthews's face with brine. He winces. Then he laughs, dry and broken. You return to your bunk well past midnight. You lie still, arms behind your head, staring into the rafters above the apprentices' quarters. Somewhere outside, snow falls across the valley. The trees bend under its weight. But down here, the salt sleeps in silence. And you, child of salt, apprentice of sweat and stone, understand something that no book or bell or nobleman can teach. The kingdom rests on the shoulders of men who work where no one watches. They labor in the dark. They carve roads through stone. They die without statues. But they are the reason kings eat, and armies march, and trade survives the winter. You turn to your side, pulling the blanket closer. The taste of salt never fades. And just before sleep takes you, a final thought lingers. If history remembers the castles, who will remember the tunnels beneath them?